Hello everyone. Today, I want to tell you about a Japanese tabletop role-playing game called Ace Killer Gene, or AKG.
バトルガールプロデュース RPG エースキラージーン
As someone could guess, the name of the game is a reference to the Japanese pop idol group AKB48. This game is also about idols, but very different ones. Here, the girls will not perform on stage, but rather become ace killers, the only people who have the necessary qualities to fight the ace, the kind of monsters that hide in human society, steal people's life energy, and rule the world from the shadows. However, in fact, the main character that players play will not be these ace killers, but rather, your main character will be their producer. In this game, you will be able to enjoy this unusual style of play where you control two characters at once. On the one hand, you will have a powerful fighting character, the Ace Killer Girl. And on the other hand, your main character, which you will roleplay for most of the game, is her producer, who will support the Ace Killer. In a nutshell, you know how there are those raising an idol simulator video games, Idolmaster, and so on. Except that here your idol will fight monsters. Or here is another weird analogy. This game is like Pokemon. You play a Pokemon master, aka producer, and the Ace Killer Girl is the Pokemon that you throw in to fight other Pokemon, well, monsters in this case. Before I go to the review of the game, I want to say that I do not actually have this book because it is not sold anywhere in digital format. But I have read the RPG called Garden Order, which system served as the basis for Ace Killer Gene. And there is also info about the game on the internet, reviews and so on. So, I hope I'm not wrong here too much. Let's look at the setting first. Here, we have basically our modern world without any differences. The only distinction is that mysterious transcendent creatures called Ace exist. Nobody knows when they first appeared, but their presence began to be noticed in the 1980s. They have the ability to suck the life force, known as Oda, out of people. Some Ace do it just from a single person and then dispose of the corpse. Others extract the Oda from a large mass of people. In the latter case, they don't have to kill anyone, but the Ace steals their emotions and enthusiasm. Ace's second ability is to induce intense fear in people. This allows them to dominate individuals, assume leadership positions in society, and generally obtain what they desire. The third ability of Ace is, of course, great physical and mental power. However, it's not all bleak for humanity. There are people who are not affected by these Ace powers and who possess powerful physical and mental abilities that can resist Ace influence. These individuals are known as having the Ace Killer Gene. But they are few in number, and most of them are young girls. Actually, in the base book, all of the Aces are girls. Guys are DLC, I guess. In order for Ace Killers to utilize their cool abilities, they also need to absorb Oda, but they can only absorb it from a special person they are compatible with. There's a secret organization called the Joker. You know, like the Joker is greater than the Ace, you get it. The organization is on the lookout for Ace Killers and people who are compatible with them. The individuals that Ace Killers can draw Oda from are called Ace Killer Producers, and the organization itself, the Joker, is disguised as a show business production company. Ace Killers are signed up there as idols. Well, and that's about it for the setting. The one thing I want to imagine is that they are not just fictitious idols, but are actually local celebrities who perform in front of the local supermarket. You know, so the enemies wouldn't figure it out. Let's talk about how this whole game works in terms of mechanics. I mentioned that AKG is based on another game system called Garden Order. Most of the rules and the character sheet are very similar. In AKG, the player will have two character sheets, one for the ace killer and one for the producer, like this. As you can see, the right side of the sheet is where all the skills, characteristics, secondary stats, items, and so on are located. They are the same for both characters, except that the ace killer will probably have bigger numbers. But on the left side of the sheet, along with the portrait, are the special abilities. These abilities are different between your characters. There is also a record sheet that is shared between both characters. Here you can mark all sorts of variable values such as wounds received, the number of abilities used, and so on. So, basically, you will play with 3 sheets. It's actually not as complicated as it sounds because the game system is not really that complicated. So to create a producer character, your main character, you build it yourself. You assign some points to the stats, or roll them randomly, choose skills and special abilities, and reserve some items. Reserve means you automatically acquire the items at the beginning of the session, even if you lost them last time. You don't buy the items with money in this game. So you do all that yourself, or you can take a pre-gen. However, there is no rules for creating the ace killers in the book. You have to choose one of 8 pre-gens in the book, and then you can also download 20 more from the game's website. Probably someone will say, well, geez, how come it's so dumb? Why cannot I build my own schoolgirl monster killer? But I think you have to look at it from the other side of things. There are those video games where you raise idols, or key Pokemon for example. You don't create your own Pokemon or an idol in those games either. They exist as a feature of the game's universe, and as far as I understand, the idea is the same here. Ace killers from the book exist in the game world and there are no others. Maybe it's supposed to immerse players in the universe somehow. I think it's kind of weird, yeah, but why not? Plus there's a big selection, 28 of them. In terms of game structure and narrative rights, most of the game mechanics are generally speaking fairly traditional TRPG. The only difference is that it is recommended to take a smaller number of players, 2 to 3, not more. This is due to the fact that the GM will have to play the ace killers, so it is already 2 to 3 NPCs that must be present in every game and play an important role there. Therefore, in order to leave room at the game session and in your head for the NPCs important to the plot, it is necessary to have a bit fewer players than normal. By the way, it would be interesting to see the ace killers be played by other players, like in Stellar Knights of the Silver Sword. The session structure here is pretty much the same as almost in all other Far East Amusement Research games. We have some sort of introductory handouts at the beginning of the session that bring the character pairs into the action. Then there's the intro part of the session, followed by the main phase where the investigation takes place, and then the final fight. After that comes the ending, and then we move on to the next session. The whole story has to fit into one gaming session. You can play one-shots, or you can play campaigns. Checks in this game are quite interesting. To make a check here, you roll a D100, and you have to roll below the value of a characteristic or the value of a skill. Characteristics here are the following: body, senses, knowledge, will, charm, and skills are many. I will not list them all. There are skills for guns, driving, close combat, dodge, socializing, working on the computer, and so on. If you roll lower than the value of your skill, you succeed. If you roll lower than 1/5 of the value, it's a critical success. But if the die rolls 95 or higher, it's a critical failure. Basically, it's all D100 rolls, which are quite common for Japanese RPG systems, thanks to the popularity of Call of Cthulhu RPG, where D100 is used. The interesting thing here is that the skill value can be more than 100. That is, for example, you may have a melee skill with a value of 165. In this case, you can divide the check into several rolls. That is, your melee check will not be a single attack, but rather 2 or 3. In such a case, the success rate of the roll should be 50% or more. So if you have a melee skill of 165, you can split it into 3 attacks, each with a success rate of 55%. Another interesting thing is that characters don't have hit points. Instead, there are several types of wounds: fatigue, light wound, heavy wound, fatal wound, and then death. Each of these types of wounds has a number of boxes that you check when you take damage. These wounds are also used to activate special abilities. Typically, you'll have an ability that says something like, "To use this ability, check 2 fatigue points to yourself." Also, in order for Ace Killer to use her awesome abilities, she needs Kizuna points. Kizuna is a bond, meaning that the more you strengthen your bond with the producer, the more powerful your Ace Killer will be. Kizuna points are given in every scene when you appear together, as well as during the fight. For example, if the producer uses his main action to say something or interact with Ace Killer in some other way. And you also can gain Kizuna points through roleplay. For example, as you gain Kizuna points, your relationship with each other will change. Each of the Ace Killers has a table with examples of the lines they say depending on the level of bonding. If at first, you have a chilly relationship, then at level 5, they will tell the producer all their secrets. And also, for each level of communication, the Ace Killer's stats will increase. Like, now you're gonna find out not only that she isn't really a cool girl with a katana, but she's actually a crybaby at heart. But now she's at level 5 bond and can use her special move, or gets +2 to damage or whatever. In addition to these special moves, there is another mechanic of extra effort, which is a few times per session. You can either swap 1s and 10s on the die roll. That is to say, you can turn the result of 91 into 19. Another option is to do extra damage or reduce the damage on yourself. However, when you do that, you take a mortal wound. But wait, your mortal wound can be dealt to your partner instead. Like, the monster is about to kill your Ace Killer, but you, the producer, throw yourself in front of her and take the hit. Another feature of the game is the way the main phase of the session unfolds, that is, the investigation phase. Naturally, the aces are damn sneaky lizard people. They conceal themselves, and you have to find them before you can fight with them. The main phase takes place on this sort of plot map. The goal here is to get from the beginning to point A, which is where Ace is. The GM can build various plot branches, forks, and junctions. All of these scenes that can happen on each point of the map will be connected in some way, or perhaps new connections will be opened in case of successful or unsuccessful checks during the scene. The scenes here are naturally not only about investigation, there are also fight scenes with Ace's servants and so on. At the end of the session, you will naturally have a big climactic battle with the Ace. The battle in this game takes place on a 5x5 square map. If you are in the single square with the enemy, then it is considered that you are in close combat and can use melee weapons. During the round you can move for a number of squares or shoot with ranged weapons for a number of squares. Basically, the combat itself is fairly traditional. You roll to hit, enemies dodge, then they try to hit you, and you dodge, all the while everyone uses all sorts of special abilities. When you meet the Ace in the final battle, Ace naturally starts emitting their dominant oppressive powers, and all characters except Ace Killers get a very large penalty to all actions that target Ace. Your chance of success drops to 1/4, or 1/2 if you successfully pass a will check. That is to say, even if you had a tough producer with a battle rifle who would shoot dead everyone during the main phase of the session, when they meet the Ace, they will probably have to do their idle support duties instead of battling. Like, shouting, come on, honey, kill him," or whatever they do to support their ace killer, because it's going to be very hard for the producer to win on his own. And that's basically everything I can tell you about the game. Since I don't own the book, I can't look at the GM section, but since it's an RPG made by Far East Amusement Research, I can say with much confidence that the GM section is SOSO. Like generic words of advice about how to be a good game master, a collection of enemies to fight, a couple of ready-made scenarios, and that's basically it. Anyway, that was the Ace Killer Gene RPG. Thematically, I like it very much. Combat idols sound very fun. The only thing is, I'd probably prefer them to fight other idols, instead of some generic shadowy evil entities. But oh well, it's not like anyone is stopping you or me from changing the setting a bit, right? It's cool that you can play with just 2 players and still have a full-fledged game because you, as a GM, will role-play ace killers, but the players will still control the combat, and you don't have to mess around with their character sheets. The rules of the game, of course, do not make any crazy breakthroughs in RPG design, but in general, they are okay. It's good that they moved away from health points to a shared resource for health and ability usage. I like it. In general, it looks like a cool game. It's a pity that it is not out in digital format yet. Hopefully, it will be one day. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Subscribe to the channel, comment, like, share, tell your friends, and all that. Goodbye.